morning and welcome to Rising. We have a very special Thursday show planned for you today. I'm so excited to be joined by Batya Ungar-Sargon. Welcome, Batya.
Thank you. We're going to have a good time, Briahna.
I love it. I love it when it's this pairing. It's a fun little switcheroo. Well, the ladies will show Robbie how it's done. Batya, start us off. What's up first today?
So we've got some breaking news this morning. Poland is going to be sending MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine, marking the first NATO country to comply with President Volodymyr Zelensky's persistent request for the aircraft. This comes just after officials released footage of Russia's attack on a U.S. surveillance drone earlier this week. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin confirmed the U.S. will continue to fly aircraft over international waters in the Black Sea.
Here at home, pundits from all sides of the aisle are hitting out at Florida's Ron DeSantis after he referred to the conflict as a territorial dispute. The Washington Post reports that a civil war has erupted in the GOP over the question of whether to support Ukraine, quote, as long as it takes. One political science professor told the Post, quote, being more hawkish wasn't necessarily a real political winner in 2012, and by the time that Trump came around in 2016, he saw an opening with key parts of that Republican base that are done with the Bush wars and this idea of remaking large parts of the world in America's image.
Now, Vice President Kamala Harris had her own take on DeSantis' stance on Ukraine during a late-night appearance last night. Let's take a watch.
What do you make of someone like Governor DeSantis, who, while there is a strain of isolationism all throughout American history, is saying that this is not in America's strategic interest to side with the Ukrainians and offer them the material aid they need to defend themselves against an invading power?
So, as vice president, I have now met with over 100 world leaders, presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, and kings. And when you have had the experience of meeting and understanding the significance, again, of international rules and norms and the importance of the United States of America standing firm and clear about the significance of sovereignty and territorial integrity, the significance of standing firm against any nation that would try to take by force another nation, if you really understand the issues, you probably would not make statements like that.
All right. So there's, I think, two layers to this. There's kind of the effective Kamala Harris critique that I'm sure she's going to get about how she frames it, the question and her general demeanor. But to get to the substance of the thing first, what do you make of that kind of an answer?
I don't make much of it. I mean, what she was effectively saying is, if you are not as important as I am, if you have not had these relationships and introductions and meetings with all of these heads of states, you are not entitled to your opinion about what your taxpayer dollars should be doing, right? She thinks she's attacking Ron DeSantis. What she's actually doing is attacking the millions and millions of Americans who are wondering, why are we so obsessed with what's happening in that country and that country's borders, and we don't care about what's happening here, and there are people here who are struggling who could definitely use $100 million, for pick your pet cause. Is it paying teachers more? Is it paying nurses more? Is it infrastructure, right? Is it the border? Whatever your issue is it better training for police? Is it more social workers to work with police? Whatever your issue is, we have extreme issues in this country. Fighting fentanyl, what could be more important, right? And instead, we're sending all this money out there. So this is the line the Democrats are taking. They're acting like these Republicans are leading their base in this direction away from funding Ukraine, when the truth is the opposite. These Republican politicians, including the two front runners for the presidential ticket in 2024, who have said, they're not into this anymore, they are following what they're seeing in the polls. And I think that those polls reflect not just Republican voters, but a lot of Democratic voters as well, including especially working class Americans.
Yeah, I mean, Colbert really teed up that question in a way that let there only be one real answer from Kamala's perspective, right? He really framed it with an expectation that she was going to give a statement that's supportive of Ukraine and unlimited aid to Ukraine, I should say. I think most people are supportive of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. But let's talk specifically about what the most recent polls say, because I think you're right about her kind of missing what the temperature is in the country more broadly, perhaps because she's been spending so much time with world leaders and kings and queens and whatnot, and not speaking to the general public. Now, this is an Associated Press Nork Center for Public Affairs research poll that's out from just last month. 48% say they favor the U.S. spending, providing weapons to Ukraine. That's less than half support providing weapons, with 29% opposed and 22% saying that they're neither in favor nor opposed. In May of last year, just after the war started, 60% of U.S. adults said they were in favor of sending the Ukraine weapons. So that's a pretty significant dip, but it still is about half the country who do support sending weapons, potentially even significant weapons like these airplanes that have been requested. So, you know, I think that is right when you say that there is a significant amount of Americans who are against this, but is Kamala Harris and the Biden administration right to say that there's still a strong base of support for their behavior, and that ultimately, in the interest of protecting, let's say, Ukrainian sovereignty, that's a decent argument that can still be sold to Americans?
Well, 100%. The question is which Americans, right? We know that elites of both parties are, whole hog in on this war, right? So yes, there's definitely a lot of people, very rich Republicans as well as, elite Democrats who are very, very supportive of unlimited aid to Ukraine. Again, like so many issues, this breaks down along class lines. Can you afford to say, look, I'm happy to keep supporting this. I don't have enough pressing needs here to say that my needs are more important than their needs, right? So my question to you would be this, Briahna. Let's say you're a liberal, a leftist, somebody whose number one issue is no more foreign wars, no more entanglements, right? No more neoliberalism, no more neoconservatism, no more exporting our values, no more American exceptionalism. Let's say you're a voter and that's your number one issue, right? The way it was for many Democratic voters for many, many, many decades, right? Wouldn't you tell them that they would have a better shot voting for a Republican in 2024 than a Democrat, than President Biden?
I wouldn't, because the Republican Party is very divided on this issue as well, and the neocon segment of the Republican Party is still very much in control. The Blob is not partisan. It's very much bipartisan, and as long as you vote for people who are willing to take money from the military-industrial complex, as long as you vote for people who are willing to bend the knee and play party politics in either party, no matter how much sophistry there is in folks' language, I think that you're going to get the same result. I think there's, you see pivots being made by folks like Kevin McCarthy, trying to toe this line of bending the knee to the Marjorie Taylor Greene part of the party, of making concessions to them because of the force the vote moment in January, where he has had to concede certain language talking points and actual substantive committee positions and the like to that faction of the party, but that was done via force. And the original reason why the Marjorie Taylor Greene section of the party was so frustrated with him was because he was more establishment than the kind of the more Trump-leaning wing of the party. So you see a willingness to play ball depending on where the power lies, but the power in Washington is always going to be, at least for the foreseeable future, very much with the Blob. So I'd like to see someone who has a longer record of standing outside of that. And even folks like Bernie Sanders, who frankly do have a long record of being oppositional to the intelligence agencies, to the foreign policy Blob, have not said anything different than Joe Biden has with respect to Ukraine. So no, I don't have a lot of confidence in any language that people might be putting out there right now when you see people who have been really walking the walk, bend the knee in this moment to this particular conflict.
I do think that juxtaposition is so important, right? When you take, so Senator Sanders was asked about funding for Ukraine, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, right after his book was launched, and he said he totally supports what President Biden has been doing. So no real anti-war pushback there. The failure of the Progressive Caucus's letter that you covered so well here on Rising, when you take those two elements and you juxtapose it with Tucker Carlson's questionnaire that you also covered last week, where the two front runners, former President Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, who's widely believed to be about to announce a run, both of them were very, very stark in their commentary, saying, like, look, Ron DeSantis, of course, got into trouble for calling it a territorial dispute, which it absolutely is at this point. Maybe it didn't start that way, but it is now, because that's what's being discussed as a way of ending it. That is a very stark juxtaposition of where, the furthest left you can get in terms of the mainstream American political scene, they are supportive of funding this as long as it takes, the way President Biden has promised. And meanwhile, the MAGA wing is at least willing to say, No more. Not on our watch. This is going to be a major issue, and we're happy to upset and offend the establishment wing. We don't need you, and we don't need your votes. You know, if you're on board with that, vote for the other guy is essentially what DeSantis and Trump are saying, and I think that's pretty powerful.
I think it's an appealing message, and I think the Democrats are really stepping in it for not realizing what that appeal is all about. Do I have confidence that it's actually going to have differing material outcomes in our foreign policy? I'm afraid not, but I don't hold it against people for whom that's their number one criteria at the polls to go ahead and at least go for the party that is willing to acknowledge your concern. I completely understand that from a political perspective, and the Democrats should take that for what it is. I look forward to hearing more about your radar coming up next, Batya. Stick around.